NTA International News.
Prospects of economic recovery and improved social infrastructure as President Muhammadu Buhari presents 2017 budget proposal of 7.298 trillion naira to joint sitting of the National Assembly. Vice President Yemi Oshibajo in diplomatic shuttle to Algiers secures Algeria's commitment to resuscitating moribund economic agreement. Coalition of political parties in the Gambia request President Muhammadu Buhari to avail other African leaders his vast experience to resolve the political logjam in the West African country. And a sigh of relief for millions around Lake Chad Basin as Memorandum of Understanding to resuscitate Lake Chad is signed. Hello there, it's good to have you join us on the news on NTA International. I am Shegun Lawole. President Muhammadu Buhari has presented an aggregate expenditure proposal of 7.298 trillion naira for the 2017 to the joint sitting of the National Assembly, raising prospects of economic recovery and improved social infrastructure in the next financial year. The figure is a nominal increase of 20.4% over 2016 estimates. The 2017 budget proposal is based on a benchmark crude oil price of $42.5 per barrel and oil production estimate of 2.2 million barrels per day and an average exchange rate of 305 to the US dollar. The president told the legislators that based on these assumptions, aggregate revenue available to fund the federal budget is 4.9 trillion naira, 28% higher than 2016 full-year projections. Oil is projected to contribute 1.985 trillion of this amount.
This fiscal plan will result in a deficit of 2.36 trillion naira for 2017, which is about 2.18% of our GDP. The deficit will be financed mainly by borrowing, which is projected to be about 2.32 trillion naira. Our intention is to source 1.067 trillion naira, or about 46% of this borrowing from external sources, while 1.254 trillion will be borrowed from the domestic market.
He's optimistic that the budget will take the country out of recession, stating that government's objective is to make Nigeria a manufacturing hub. And with me in the studio to take a look at the budget proposal presented by President Muhammadu Buhari is Dr. Uche Waleke. He is an Associate Professor of Finance, Nasarawa State University, Kefi. Dr. Uche, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, the leadership of the National Assembly acknowledged the fact that the 7.298 trillion naira budget proposal of the president came early enough. Now, the question is, how will this impact on the development envisaged by Mr. President?
Yeah, thank you very much, Shego. I think the issue is going to be implementation, just as the Speaker acknowledged in his speech today at the National Assembly. For me, what is important is that the budget proposals are based on realistic benchmarks. Talking about the $42.5 per barrel oil price benchmark, which in my view is realistic, going by forecasts from reputable international organizations such as the U.S. Energy Information Administration, which some time ago put the average oil price for 2017 at $52 per barrel. You also have investment banks and rating agencies that are upbeat about the oil price performance in 2017. Again, this is also against the backdrop of the OPEC agreements, even the ones they have had with non-OPEC countries on oil production cuts. So I think that's realistic. The other issue too is the 2.2 million barrels per day projection. Yes, this year we've had on the average, as we've been told, 1.6 million barrels per day, and recently it's come up to 1.9 million barrels. But I think that the government is in a better position now to address the issues of production disruptions, especially when they use the carrot approach. The carrot approach will ensure that the target of 2.2 million barrels per day is met. The other issue too is that of the exchange rate of 305 naira to the dollar. When the MTF was prepared and submitted, the medium-term expenditure framework on which this appropriation bill is based, what it had was 290 naira to the dollar, and some of us felt it was unrealistic. Of course, there are also some members of the National Assembly who echoed the same sentiments that it was unrealistic, and it's a good thing that that has been recognized, and the exchange rate is now moved to a more realistic figure of 305, because that is the rate at which the CBN has been intervening in the markets as the interbank official rate. And of course, if the revenue targets are met, you can be sure that that will impact on our reserves, and they wouldn't be where they are now, around $24 billion. Okay. And that positive impact on the reserves will, of course, rub off positively on the exchange rate. So in my view, too, that's realistic.
So if the crude oil price goes up as high as $52 per barrel, as against 42.5, which is the current benchmark, what's going to happen?
Yes, what will happen is that you would expect the naira to firm up. You will expect the naira to appreciate. Again, you also look at the fact that this budget has a deficit of 2.2 trillion naira, as the president said. So it will also have the effect of probably reducing the deficit. Deficit is going to be financed, largely by borrowing. And what is of interest to me is that borrowing this time around is going to be more of external debt, because of our experience with servicing domestic debts. In 2016, if you recall, Shegu, the government provided for 1.4 trillion naira in respect of debt service alone, and out of which about 1.3 trillion was meant for domestic debt service. So that tells you that domestic debts are very expensive to service. So the idea of rebalancing in favor of external debt, especially when they are coming from concessional windows, will go a long way in helping to reflect the economy, in helping to drive growth. Provided whatever we are taking from outside is, I keep saying it, provided whatever we are borrowing is project tied.
Before I allow you to go, now this budget is quite ambitious. It's tagged a budget of recovery and growth. And the president so much believes that it will take us out of a recession. Now, what is expected of Nigerians to assist government in realizing this dream?
Yes, is the implementation that will determine how early we get out of recession, or how early we begin to see the recovery signs. Is the implementation, as I told you earlier on, the capital vote for 2016 hasn't done to a significant level. The role expected of Nigerians, of course, is to key into the import substitution drive of the government, patronizing locally made goods. The government itself to patronizing locally made goods, such that we conserve, we put less pressure on the dollars.
All right, Dr. Uche, I want to say a big thank you to you for coming on our news tonight. I've been talking to Dr. Uche Waleke. He's an associate professor of finance, Nasarawa State University, Kefi. And moving on now, the high-level ECOWAS mission to Gambia has encouraged President Yahya Jammeh to consider his rejection of the recent presidential election results and work towards upholding the nation's constitution for lasting peace, stability, and democratic order in the Gambia. This was during mediation talks convened by President Muhammadu Buhari and other sub-regional leaders in Banjul, aimed at resolving the political impasse in that country. State House correspondent Adamu Sambu quotes the opposition coalition leaders as saying their hope is independent on President Buhari's military experience and his opposition leadership background.
Hello, sir. Welcome to the Gambia. How are you, sir? No one needs to be told that since the December 9 public statement by President Yahya Jammeh changing his position on the outcome of the country's presidential election barely 1 week after conceding defeat, the Gambia has been in a state of uncertainty, apprehension and despondency. Worried over the situation, President Muhammadu Buhari and 3 other African leaders converged on Banjul towards ensuring that peaceful and smooth transfer of power is not undermined. Consequently, series of meetings were held with the outgoing President Yahya Jammeh, President-elect Adama Barrow, heads of security services and other stakeholders on the best way forward. The joint mission asked President Jammeh to accept that the people of the Gambia have spoken through the ballot box and their decision should not be reversed. The President-elect Adama Barrow, on the other hand, was impressed upon to refrain from making statements that could create further anxiety but commit to peaceful transition. The African leaders also appealed to the Gambian security forces to reject violence, uphold the constitution and laws of the republic, give full respect to human rights, and discharge their duties professionally.
We met with all the entities concerned. And now we go back to our colleagues at a meeting of the authority on Saturday in Abuja. At the same time, the President, all the entities have assured us that peace and stability will remain in the Gambia as the transition process proceeds to a conclusion.
We're optimistic that, the situation has been calmed, and we hope that the Constitution will be respected. I think another important issue is that the Independent Electoral Commission that carried out the supervised elections are adamant that it was really free and fair, and they have all the documentation to prove that that was the case, and that's really important. So the main protagonists, Mr. President, the President-elect, the Election Commission, and the security chiefs are all agreed pretty much that follow the Constitution and maintain peace and respect for the law. So that was very heartening.
President Yahya Jammeh, who has been on the throne for 22 years, lost re-election bid to Adama Barrow, considered defeat, but later reneged on that and made some questionable promotion in the nation's military. President Muhammadu Buhari has since returned to Abuja. Adamu Sambu, NTA News.
The Nigeria-Algeria Binational Commission, set up in 2003 to enhance bilateral cooperation, which had gone moribund, has been revived at a meeting between Vice President Yemi Osinbajo and Algerian Prime Minister Abdelmalik Selail. State House correspondent Jide Onifade reports that this was part of other important matters discussed during Vice President's two-day official visit to that country.
The Vice President was received on arrival into the country by Algerian Prime Minister Abdelmalik Selail, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation Ramtanel Lamamra, and other top government officials of Algeria. Also to receive him were Nigeria's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Khadija Bukar Abba Ibrahim, and Acting Ambassador of Nigeria in Algiers, Musa Nuhu. After a brief reception at the Wari Boumediene Airport, the Vice President, along with the Algerian Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, visited the Square of Martyrs, where he laid a wreath and observes a moment of silence in honor of the fallen heroes. And back at the State House, Vice President Osinbajo held meetings with his Algerian counterpart, Abdelmalik Selail, on economic matters, and stresses the importance of cooperation among African countries, especially in the fight against terrorism, which he describes as the greatest challenge confronting the continent. He also met with the country's president.
Sure, some might be aware of the Trans-Saharan Highway, the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline, as well as the Trans-Saharan fiber optic facility. These are all economic issues that we are looking at, and we have also discussed very widely with Mr. President on issues of cooperation in the Africa Union and issues of cooperation in the fight against terrorism.
The Trans-Saharan Road, which will start from Algiers up to Lagos, Nigeria, and then the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline project, which will start from the Niger Delta to pass through the Niger Republic to Algiers, then to Spain and Italy.
Diplomatic relationships were established since 1962, and since then the relationship has fostered and forged ahead and grown stronger and stronger by the day.
A state dinner was organized to honor the visiting vice president and his entourage. In Algiers, Algeria, Jide Onifade, NTA News.
You're watching NTA International News from Abuja, Nigeria. Time to take a short break. To return with more reports, stay tuned.
Hear the call of change. Stand up, Nigeria. Change is here and it's going to stay. Change begins with you. Oh yeah, make we go. Go to let the change begin from within. Look at you, Ogerula. Change begins with you and me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me. Change begins with me.
Welcome back. Succor is on the way for about 40 million people in 4 countries that rely on Lake Chad Basin for their livelihood following the signing of a memorandum of understanding to resuscitate the lake. Correspondent Musba Adan Wahab reports that the signing in Abuja is a fallout of the 14th Summit of Heads of State and Government of Lake Chad Basin Commission earlier in the year.
The story of Lake Chad has been the typical example of a climate change reality. Amplified by man-made degradation, the 1/6 largest lake in the world has shrunk by about 90%, threatening about 40 million people. The 4 countries will survive on the lake's ecosystem for farming, fishing and other water uses. An issue that heads of member states are not only concerned about, but also committed to stopping and reversing the trend. Having met and resolved to immediately begin the process, the Lake Chad Commission, under the chairmanship of Nigeria's Water Resources Minister Suleiman Adamu, has found a partner, Power China Corporation. The solution is to transfer water from the Congo Basin to replenish the Lake Chad Basin following the improvements of the feasibility earlier done.
Well, we have a definite and more implementable approach to this project. We will now go into another stage whereby we're going to seek for funding to do the detailed planning.
Acknowledging the complexity of the project, Suleiman Adamu calls for concerted efforts to actualize it.
We cannot afford the Lake Chad to go extinct. We cannot allow Lake Chad to dry up.
The implementation and completion of various projects, definitely the people around the Lake Chad or in the basin will be benefited.
Minister of Water and Sanitation, Nigeria Republic, led the Nigerian team to the signing ceremony. In Abuja, Musbal and Wahab, NTA News.
The federal government plans to sell 83.24 billion naira in treasury bills on the 22nd of December. This and more on Business News with Chiazalam Ekie.
Federal government plans to sell 83.24 billion naira in treasury bills at an auction on December 22nd. The CBN disclosed that it will sell 28.12 billion in 3-month papers and 55.12 billion naira in 6-month bills using the Dutch auction system. It will be recalled that the federal government announced plans to raise 1.23 billion through issuance of treasury bills in the first quarter of next year. The federal government issues treasury bills as part of a borrowing plan to finance government budget deficits, curb inflationary growth, and manage liquidity in the banking system. And oil prices fell on Wednesday following a rise in U.S. crude, and estimate that OPEC may have produced more crude in November than previously thought, undermining a planned cut in outputs. And finally, let's take a look at a summary of closing figures on the Nigerian stock markets. And that's business news. I'm Chiazala Meki. The news continues. Please stay with us.
And then for happenings around the globe, here is Adibola Brooksley Sunday to take us through.
A deal to evacuate rebel fighters and civilians from eastern Aleppo appears to have stalled, with heavy shellings reported in the Syrian city. A ceasefire was declared in Aleppo on Tuesday, and buses brought in to evacuate people out of the devastated enclave, but fighting resumed on Wednesday. Syrian activists also say airstrikes over rebel-held territory have resumed. The breakdown of the deal brokered by Russia and Turkey is being attributed to a demand from the Syrian government. It is said to be seeking the evacuation of its own injured fighters and civilians from nearby towns encircled by opposition forces. In recent days, government troops have made sweeping gains, confining the rebels to small pockets of the city. And the United Nations Regional Envoy Mohammed Ibn Chemba says Gambian outgoing President Yahya Jammeh will be strongly sanctioned if he tries to stay in power. Mr. Ibn Chambers has also urged Gambian army to leave the country's Electoral Commission office, which it seized on Tuesday. The outgoing President, Mr. Jammeh, considered defeat to Adama Barrow before changing his mind. Adebola Brooksley Sunday, NTA News.
And our sports. Chief of Staff to the President intervened on Super Falcons' financial entitlement as Nigeria wins first match at beach football competition in Lagos. Manzi Marcos reports.
The Super Falcons, Africa's current women's football champions, will have a cause to smile